Hello, here we are with my Kristen Majors response take two. Sorry about some of these technical issues, but here we go. First of all, what you got out of the Leopold reading, yes, absolutely being connected to the land is a very important thing, and although there are some more kind of nuances to that, I do like that you brought up this idea of having more relationship to the land, just beyond just use. If people are out on the land using it all the time without actually thinking about how they're connected to it, that doesn't actually help. That's not enough. That's good. I would have liked to hear maybe some examples or some thoughts from you about your own experiences, maybe. Or anything like that. Any kind of personal anecdote would be really great to hear, to really connect that to your experience. So when you talk about McDonough and Braungart, I think you brought up one of the most important features, which is having a more proactive vision. In particular, sustainability, moving beyond, as you put it, the tiny band-aids, or the aspirin, as they refer to it as well. That's such an important part of it. We can't just jump into only being proactive, only doing prevention. We still have to continue doing what we're doing to kind of reduce the bad, as they put it. But moving some of our work towards prevention is going to be. There's a lot of research showing how prevention in almost any field is a way to very quickly swing things towards the positive. So even if you're only putting 1 to 5% of your total resources having to deal with problems towards prevention instead of just ameliorating issues as they're already there, like say kind of traditional downcycling or recycling, that's a great shift still. So a good point to key in on. Again, some kind of illustrative example would be great with that. With Agyeman, the San Francisco plan, connecting environmental justice and sustainability is a very important thing, and it did come out in the plan, which is great. The plan is a really good thing, but one thing that I would bring up is what happened with the plan. That's one of the key issues with that, is that the plan didn't completely go anywhere, and why. There are connections between culture and getting the public behind something, and enforcement, and all these other things that didn't end up going hand in hand with the San Francisco plan, and so it didn't do what its proponents really wanted it to do because of those issues. So it's important to think about how policy isn't enough. Policy has to be part of a larger picture, which I'll be presenting on soon, and you'll see a little bit in the environmental empowerment model how policy and these structures link in with other important features in order to actually make these sorts of things go so that they get enough traction. So as far as Malthus and Ehrlich are concerned, their prophecies or predictions haven't happened, but as you say, it's still good to take them very seriously. They had a good point. They were using somewhat simpler models than a lot of what we can see now. What we learn over time is that we're very good at propelling ourselves forward kind of on the same path, and so we've maybe stretched out the time frame, but it's still important to kind of take these things seriously. I would invite you to think about some of the added variables and some of the nuances that maybe they didn't think about. There's a lot of other things going on that have really changed the way that they look at things. Like, not everyone uses the same amount of resources. So when you think about a family in a developing nation versus a family in the United States, there is a vast difference in the amount of resources that they're consuming. In fact, overpopulation is less of an issue than overconsumption. Then when those two things come together, that's when you really have trouble. So when you look at nations, developing nations like, say, India is an excellent example of this, where we brought technologies in so that they had better health outcomes, better nutrition, things like that, in some of the poorer areas. And this kind of Western culture, we do this all over the place, and it seems like a good idea, right? We want people to live longer, we want less infant mortality, of course. But at the same time, if you don't have a cultural shift and you have traditions from agrarian economies where people are having more children because they're used to infant mortality and they're used to needing children that they can raise to help with farming or ranching or whatever. Those sorts of things get very complicated very quickly, but we need to take them into account. And then when you have again, you see this happening a lot in India, where we've kind of oops, losing my, hope you're able to hear that, where you have people who are taking on the consumption patterns of folks in the United States, but then at the same time in with a booming number of people being born, so you have overpopulation plus overconsumption. So that's when things get really tricky. So those kinds of nuances are really important when we're thinking about these kinds of long-term predictions, not just overpopulation. You also brought up this idea of looking at the world as not just a resource and a dump, but as something more than that, and that's definitely something that these readings are trying to get at too. So one thing I would ask you is, how do you do that? How do you change people's minds about that? How do you change the way that people act on a daily basis? To let them know that it's important, and not just to make them feel guilty, or maybe not to make them feel guilty at all, but instead to motivate them to do something differently, and to show them another option that isn't so much extra work that they're just going to not do it. You mentioned poverty as well towards the end of your video, but you didn't really weave it into what you were talking about. So I wasn't sure if you were talking about it in terms of overpopulation and scarcity, or in terms of environmental justice, or what. So that's something that I think you can kind of weave in more, those kinds of ideas. But overall, you did a good job with your video. I look forward to hearing more of your ideas next time. Hopefully these notes will be helpful for you. So I'll look forward to your next post.